Welcome back, gents. Welcome to a quick little video comparison here. I'm testing a lot of things at once. First and foremost, these two different barrels in an AR platform. Top row, McGowen Precision. Bottom row, Wilson Combat. Wilson Combat, by far, has been my most accurate barrel where I can handedly get under half-inch groups. The McGowen Precision, other end of the spectrum. When I originally got this barrel back, it had a bad crown on it, essentially. And I sent it back, they redid it, and it's still not quite right. So that's the other aspect I'm testing. This is the before, and then at a later date, when I get those crowning tools, there's going to be an afterwards. I've already kind of written this barrel off as defunct, so what's the worst that can happen, right? Anyway, this is also my first time ever using LEVERevolution, as well as those small rifle RUAG primers. And so far, I'm pretty impressed. It actually burns really clean, but I'm getting a little bit too distracted. Let's get back to the task at hand of interpreting groups. Okay, top row, McGowen Precision. You can see here, well, just looking in totality, nothing really to write home about. The best group is this third group here, a 4-shot group that's a little over an inch still. Otherwise, it looks like we're going about 1.25 to 1.5 inches. But this first group, very spread out, nothing to write home here about. The first group, this is definitely nothing to write home about, and it's also only a 3-shot group. The next group is a 5-shot group, but notice the huge shift in the point to impact. That is a pretty gross shift to the point to impact. But also you have a nice tight core group with an outlier there. I blame the crown for that. Purely subjective, purely theoretical. It could be the load, but when you compare it to the barrel down below, yeah, I think we can blame that on the crown. But moving on. The third group, like said, is our most accurate, or rather I should say our best group. However, the point to impact kind of stays in the same neighborhood. It is a shift left, but it's not a huge shift, especially since we're going up in gross increments, 0.5 grains. The fourth group, we can see the core group, quote unquote, these two groups here, or these two shots here, stay kind of in the same neighborhood. At least they are pairing up as with this one, but we have these two outliers up there. Is this a scatter node? Maybe, because I think we're starting to pull back here with the last group where things are still shifting to the left, but then we have these gross outliers out there, which again, I partly blame on the load, but I blame on the crown too. Now, with this Wilson Combat barrel, there's some interesting things to note here in terms of a harmonics, but also the accuracy. Like, for starters, something's obvious. It is generally a lot better groups. In fact, our worst group of the day, our maximum charge, which I should say our highest charge, all these loads are fairly anemic. Well, they're middle of the road. Anyway, our maximum charge here, our highest charge, looks almost, with very little exaggeration, it looks almost like your standard group with a McGowen Precision barrel. Yikes. But here's something else that's really interesting. You have your minimum charge here, which is nothing to write home about. Looks like maybe a little under an inch. When we bump up to our next charge, we have a pretty big shift rightward, which matches what the McGowen Precision did. In fact, what's interesting is this McGowen Precision is a bull barrel, but it shifted by approximately the same amount. We could argue more with that flyer, but let's take averages into account. I guess we'll go ahead and say the mean average. With the next charge, with the rest of the load development, everything is drastically different. Like 27 grains, instead of being in the same ballpark, like the McGowen Precision, things shift back to the lower left. And this looks like it might be a scatter node, actually. Then, with this, 27.5, we have a return to form, and things are pretty accurate here. And with 28 grains, things not only do they shift drastically downward, but things just basically fall apart. Now, here's the final thing I want to bring to your attention. And this is kind of neat in a way. So if we treat this like a optimum charge weight, there's a little bit of math, there's a formula we can do. It's kind of a handy dandy little tool, because groups kind of print in a pattern. Not always. It depends on your barrel. But looking for those scatter nodes, as well as the accuracy nodes, can be pretty important. I said this 27 grains almost looked like a scatter node to me. And certainly this 28 definitely looks like a scatter node to me. Like something's horribly wrong there. This 27.5, this looks pretty good. Let's put a theory to a test. So 27.5. Now, when groups print as a sine wave, so whether you want to call it a node and an antinode, accuracy node, scatter node, or however you want to label those harmonics, they happen about 1 to 2% away from one another. So 27.5 times 0.985. Enter. Well, that is disturbingly close to this. Now we said 1.5%, right? So let's take this number and let's times it by, 3%. Wow, look at that. So, if I were to build upon this, or if I was just to simply load from this data I have here, 27.5 grains would be about what I load. Whether we could do seeding depth tests, attach a tuner break, or something else like that, this would be a good place to start. So now, armed with that knowledge of reading groups kind of like a sine wave and using this tool, a basic calculator, to calculate things out, that's great and all, but let me pose some arguments against doing things that way. Or rather, I should say, give you some warnings. Because just because you found an accuracy node doesn't mean it's the best accuracy node. Because, well, look here, and there are things I've discussed and mentioned before. 27 grains, huge shift to the lower left for point impact. 28 grains, huge shift down, and things definitely fall apart. It's a scatter node. Of course things are going to fall apart. But there doesn't always have to be that huge shift of the point impact to make it a scatter node. So although, if all the environmentals were the same, both with loading my ammo, but also with shooting my ammo, I would be very confident I'm going to get the same results here. However, what if the environmentals were different? Whether it's the temperature, because I don't know how temperature stable this powder is. I'm going to have to test that, obviously. But what about barometric pressure? What about humidity? Things like that. So even though 0.5 grains that's pretty cushy. Like, there's definitely worse nodes to be had there. But again, I don't know my confidence level with this powder or this primer. So it could be that I fire it just simply on the same day and it's nice, bright and sunny, a little bit warmer. Maybe things just fall apart completely like that. Chances are maybe that's going to happen because huge shift in the point of impact there with only 0.5 grains worth of powder. So that's something to keep your eyes out when you're examining your groups. Take a look at the sine wave, but also the shifts to the point of impact. Like, where do they hit and how will things be affected? The charge above and below, where things look like they're going to be pretty good. So there you go, a very quick barrel test where I'm testing two barrels against one another, but also keep in mind, there's going to be a repeat of this test down the road, and it's going to be with a recrowned McGowen precision barrel. So this is a little bit of an unfair showing towards them. On the flip side, don't ship out your barrel with a bad crown. So it is what it is. Anyway, see you guys next range trip.